very much for coming along. So, as has been said, my name's Liz Bacon. I'm actually currently the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Abertay, but I will become the Vice-Chancellor on the 1st of May this year. I have a background in computer science, so I very much recognise the digital stuff that we've been talking about, and really that's from the last speaker. Absolutely agree with everything she said, and it's really at the heart of what we do. But today I'm going to talk about the role of women in the fourth industrial revolution. So if I can encourage you to ask questions, as you've heard already this morning, there are two mechanisms. We will have a physical microphone, but you can also go to Slido, enter the hashtag, choose the auditorium, and then you can also upvote any of the questions that others have asked if we don't have time to get through them all at the end. So, brief overview of my talk. I'm going to talk a bit about, first of all, just to agree what the fourth industrial revolution is. There's lots of definitions, lots of discussions, but at least we have a common view for the talk. I also then want to talk about women in society today and technology and what the current position is, and then look at what we actually learned from the pandemic. And then finally get to talk about the role of women in society and technology in the fourth industrial revolution and the part that higher education can play. So, firstly, to the fourth industrial revolution. I kind of like the definition that comes from the World Economic Forum. The focus, of course, about the actual transformation of the fourth industrial revolution is a focus on technology. And people are looking at fundamental changes to the way we work, the way we live, and the way we relate to one another. And here's a quote from what they say: merging the physical, digital, and biological worlds in ways that create huge promise, but also potential peril. Technology is my thing, but I have to admit there's challenges as well as opportunities with tech. An example there, AI-generated faces were considered more trustworthy in some research than real ones. So it gives you an idea of some of the challenges we face. But I think the other thing that they talk about is the speed, breadth, and depth of the revolution that we're facing is about how we rethink our world, our lives, how we work, how we create value for, and even what it means to actually be human. So it's about a creation of an inclusive and sustainable and human-centered future. But just looking immediately at the fourth industrial revolution, looking at, I'm sure you've all read some of those predictions around what will happen regarding job automation. Both male and female roles are at risk. They're at risk now. You've already seen automation. But women around the world tend to do more of the repetitive jobs, and so they are probably at risk more early on in the cycle of the fourth industrial revolution. Where are we now? Well, we are seeing unprecedented levels of disruption, socially, economically, environmentally. We have globalization, we have integrated services, we have the rise of the individual and the customer. We have artificial intelligence that's already outperforming humans in specific narrow areas. We have huge challenges around environmental sustainability and climate change. But again, as I said before, everything that technology brings us with huge benefits also brings challenges. We have addictive behaviors with people being online too much. We have challenges around social inclusion, of people not being able to afford computers or not understanding them. We have a huge rise in cyber terrorism, and we have huge privacy and ethical issues, just to name but a few. So, impact of technology on society. Business models are being disrupted. We're changing the way we do things. We have fewer silos than we did in the past, far more integration and automation. And this is not particularly related to the fourth industrial revolution, but I just like this as an example. Here's in 2000, Goldman Sachs employed 600 equity traders, and you can see in that middle picture what that physical space used to look like. By 2017, there were 2 supported by 200 computer engineers. And again, on the right-hand side, you can see the space and how that's changed. It's just an example of the disruption that technology is causing. But UK digital transformation has accelerated as a result of the pandemic, and it's predicted to result in 150 million technology jobs in the next 5 years in all areas of society. FinTech, health tech, agri-tech, everything tech. Technology is just transforming everything we do, and so we do need to think about how are we managing that as a society, and how what is the role of women going to be in that. But the question for pretty much every worker is not if, but when technology is going to disrupt their business. But also, I think something that people may not particularly have grasped in the 4th Industrial Revolution is the fact that this is not a linear trend. It is actually exponential. I can't claim to know precisely where we are on the curve, but there's no question that the use of artificial intelligence and the way we're using technology to transform our lives is absolutely exponential. One of the examples that people talk about, smart cities, climate change, 4th Industrial Revolution, will we have ever those 15-minute cities? Those 15-minute cities where you can get to do anything, buy anything, experience anything within 15 minutes of where you live. You know, you can purchase stuff, you can go to the cinema, everything to try and reduce the environmental impact. But I think already we know in the sector that we have a huge deficit of technology skills, and it's set to get worse. So encouraging more women into technology, both the use of it, the design of it, the impact of it, as well as actually building it, I think is quite critical going forward. But I want to just pause for a moment before we bring these 2 topics together to look at women in technology and society today, to understand how they are able to engage or not and really drive or experience and support this revolution. So women today, you may or may not accept this, but there is massive bias. I think there's so much research that has been shown, conscious or unconscious bias is prevalent across most societies, no matter how much we might strive for that not to be the case. Just to give you an example from a journal last year, as recent as 2018, over 104 economies still had laws preventing women working in specific jobs. 59 economies had no sexual harassment laws in workplace, and many economies, husbands can legally prevent their wives from working. Less than 30% of the world's STEM researchers are women, and we also have a lot of social norms, the way where you teach in higher education or indeed in education. We talk very much about the past white males. And I know many of those of you in higher education will say, yeah, okay, we've got programs around decolonization, etc., trying to bring in more diverse thinking and understanding of our history. But nevertheless, that is kind of there. We talk, for example, about Newton and Einstein a lot more than we do about Marie Curie or Ada Lovelace. But worldwide, 12% fewer women use the internet than men. So all of these are actually taking women away from having that impact in the 4th Industrial Revolution. Why does it matter, do you ask? A lot of people will pose me the question, well, we have many, many disciplines or many careers that are male-dominated or female-dominated. Why does it matter? Why are we trying to force women into this? Well, firstly, I don't think we are trying to force women into it, and I'll make a case for that in a moment. But I would argue that the impact of the 4th Industrial Revolution on society is too important to lose that input from women. In the UK at school, females consistently achieve higher than males in IT-related subjects, yet they choose generally not to go into the discipline. But my last point here is actually the key one that I want to make for the 4th Industrial Revolution. And it's a report from McKinsey, who does this analysis every year, and they do some amazing reports. Companies in the top quartile for gender or racial and ethnic diversity are more likely to have financial returns above their national industry medians. And actually, if you look at that, 15% for gender, but 35% for ethnic diversity. So ethnic diversity is even more important in a way to a business than female, than women. So my point is, this is not a feminist issue. This is a business and a societal issue. If you want to actually have a business that thrives in the fourth industrial revolution, you need to have women and you need to have a diverse workforce. Otherwise, you are simply not getting the input that you should be getting into your business. What are the barriers? Why do women tend to not go towards tech? I won't talk through all of these, but I'm sure if I talk through the media representation, if I talk about the nerd in the corner with a ponytail, sandals, you're going to recognize some of those stereotypes. It isn't something that perhaps women flock to. There's a lack of understanding about IT careers, both by careers advisors as well as parents. There's a lot of gender bias by careers advisors. It's been shown that they will tend to push men or the boys towards typically more male-oriented careers and the women towards more female-oriented careers. Deliberately or unconsciously, I don't know, but that happens. We don't have a lot of qualified teachers. Perception of the industry male-dominated. And the stereotypes one, I'll leave you to look up on Google. There have been some interesting experiments with the Heidi Howard. And a lot of controversial about the use of the names, but essentially when shown a common profile where you only change the names and say, how suitable do you think this person is for the job? The women got much less or much more negative feedback. So the way we judge women, the way the use of our language in adverts, the tendency to promote on our own image, old boys network, there's masses and masses of reasons why women are put off the tech industry. And I suppose to me, that final point is we stereotype genders from the moment people are born. Blue for boys, pink for girls. Those photographs were actually my photographs that I took in the Middle East. I just couldn't believe it. I was walking past a shop and just thought, in this day and age, really? But actually, many parents of today tell me that actually things are getting worse. We have toys for boys and toys for girls. And I think there's a huge issue around getting equality into society until we stop actually stereotyping and we treat our kids the same, regardless of their gender. So, what did we learn from the pandemic? Well, there's a lot of positives there. One would think that actually supporting women working from home could be great. It could be liberating. And for many women, I think it has been. 80% of people enjoy working from home. I certainly did. I like being back in the office, but I also like working from home. 41% said they were more productive, 28% as productive. Not commuting, a big bonus. You've got an hour or two perhaps back in your day you can do something with, which is great to support your work-life balance. Lots of organisations are trying not to drift back. They've given up office space. It's a bit of a big experiment. There are some industries that are better served through or make it easier to work at home. Obviously, if you're working in a restaurant, it's pretty difficult to do that from home. I suppose you could control a robot or something doing your service for you. But there are big questions that we haven't really answered yet about, did it work because people already basically knew each other at work, that they could actually then communicate at home better? Did it succeed because everyone knew it was temporary? And will people just gently drift back to what they always knew? I don't think we particularly have the answer to that at the moment. But if we look at the supposedly liberating aspects of women working from home, again going back to some of the McKinsey reports from the US, women during lockdown were 1.5 times more likely than fathers to work another 3 hours in the day on housework, childcare, other caring responsibilities. That's another 20 hours a week. That's kind of 1.5 weeks worth of work. And certainly in higher education, we know that submissions for disseminating research outputs plummeted by women, certainly at the start, but actually for many men it went up. So we didn't achieve equality. So what was the result? In the US, 1 in 4 women in corporate jobs considered downshifting their career or leaving the workforce. It had a much greater impact on women, and also diverse employees worldwide reported greater challenges during the pandemic. So I will get positive in a minute, but bear with me on my negativity. So again, back to the World Economic Forum, and it's something that McKinsey pick up. And I watch them with interest because every year they report on how long is it going to take at our current rate of progress for women to get equality with men. For many years, the answer has been around 100 years. Now, the pandemic seems to have amplified that. Maybe we'll go back to the 100 years soon, but we're now at 130 years, which is extraordinary. And of course, the fourth industrial revolution is happening now. We need women in the workforce with equality in men to help drive that forward. So what is the role of women and society in the fourth industrial revolution? Well, I think there's a lot of opportunities as well as a lot of challenges. But I think my first point is inclusion of women in the fourth industrial revolution in society is a joint responsibility with men, and exclusion has joint risks. And what I'm always interested in, because I've sort of done talks on women in computing, my discipline for a long time, is when I look at the audience, and I'm looking around at you now, you'll find 95% of the women, when there's a women topic, 95% of the audience will kind of be women. So thank you for the few men that are here today for turning up to listen to this important topic. But that's a huge issue for us, and it speaks volumes that mostly the men will look at this title and go, that isn't for me. Women sorted out on the side, and that is just so wrong. And that's part of the stereotyping, part of the societal challenges that we have to be able to jointly solve this problem, as opposed to just say, oh, women solve it on their own. But for me, the key thing is that we need to break down the gender stereotypes. As you've heard me say already, we need to stop the underrepresentation of women, and women need to be empowered by technology, not held back by technology. I don't have the answer to that because, as I said earlier, looking at the different barriers, for me, I have tried over the years, I've been involved in hundreds of initiatives, after-school clubs, role models, you name it, all sorts of websites, examples, and somehow we cannot crack this. It's only when I've been out to schools and talked to kids, and you might sort of light a little flame of enthusiasm, and then it feels like the women go home and they get squashed by society, by stereotypes, by the media, by their parents. And it's only if they're really, really passionate about the topic do they kind of fight their way through that and then go on to be more involved in computing. So we have to, I believe, actually fundamentally change society, which is a big ask, because we have so many different norms and conventions that many of us don't even think about. I'll give you an example, I won't say where, but I was chairing a meeting earlier this week, and someone had put me down as the chairman. If you read the book Invisible Women, and if you haven't read it, I strongly go and advise you to look at it, but we have societal norms that say words that have a male connotation are okay for everybody. But I would challenge most men in the room to say, well, if I called you a chairwoman, would that be okay? Would you feel comfortable with that? It's those little things that you don't often think about, but we accept in society that reinforce sort of the male aspect being as the norm, or the male terminology being as the norm. However, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. one of the things that artificial intelligence is not as good at the moment is the creative side. It's much better at automating repetitive tasks that you can easily define. Women tend to be involved more in the creative side. So empathy, compassion, therapy, psychology, coaching, although I do worry that often they tend to be the lower paid jobs. But I think there is hope there that women can perhaps use technology in those sectors to enhance what they do. And certainly that will play a role in the fourth industrial revolution. But say, going back to working from home, I think it's been a game changer for many women over the years. But overall, it seems to have had, certainly during the pandemic, which I recognise has been an extreme version of working at home, hasn't helped women as much as we would have hoped. In fact, it's had sort of the opposite effect. But I think it does allow women to engage in new markets, to drive new economies. And I think there's huge potential there for women to be able to work more flexibly from home. And if you go back to the concept of the 15-minute city, ask yourself, will women be running businesses thousands of miles away on other continents that they don't have to visit? Maybe with climate change, that's how the world will be going forward, that actually we do less traveling and we do more work from home. But I think for me, the importance is that women need to have those opportunities and we need to facilitate that. But this all starts from birth. It's not something higher education can easily just fix. But what is the role of higher education in the fourth industrial revolution? Well, I think we have a responsibility to educate students about how technology can be used to empower everyone, not just women, but particularly empower women, but not shut them out. At the moment, many are excluded from that. We need to work with society to change gender stereotypes and call it out. So going back to the example that I had earlier in the week, I did call it out. I said, okay, I would rather be called a piece of furniture than indicate that I'm male. In other words, a chair as opposed to a chairman. No problem, happy to oblige, but the thinking of the person that wrote that agenda for me was interesting. I think we have to educate all our students on the value of diversity, not just for the sake of it, but as I said earlier, it impacts society, it impacts business, economically, socially, environmentally. You need diverse input into the thinking of the world and how we go forward. You need it in terms of the impact of the fourth industrial revolution, or we'll get it wrong. You need it in sustainability. We need to educate our students on entrepreneurship, new business models, new flexible ways of working. So I think for me it's quite important that we don't just revert to how we were pre-pandemic. But we also need to prepare students to be resilient, good mental health and physical health. And I think that's, again, something that has obviously emerged through the pandemic that's been particularly challenging for many of our staff and students, understandably. But if we haven't got good physical and mental health, you're going to struggle in the workforce. And again, as one of the speakers mentioned earlier today, people are predicted to have several careers, not just several jobs. They will have to be lifelong learners. And so, yes, that little slide at the bottom, which I rather liked, is, again, back to stereotypes of how people just instinctively think of women. And for me, that's the most important thing, that we have to break down those stereotypes. We have to challenge them. We have to call them out. We have to educate our students so that they will start a new generation and certainly change the way that hopefully they bring up their children in future. And we can go a little faster than the predicted 136 years. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to take questions. So there is a roaming mic, but I've got a couple on Slido. So as you mentioned with Ada Lovelace, women were the first computer scientists. So how can HEIs accelerate inclusivity for women in IT careers again? It's really, really hard. As I said, I've been I've been involved in this women in computing for over 30 years. We have had some successes. We've changed the national curriculum in the UK, and I think that certainly helped. I did read a report last year that said I think more students are progressing through to A levels and things in computer science, but we have a massive shortage of teachers, which isn't helping the problem. And I think also the nature of the structure of our school curriculum is a problem, because there's so many core subjects students have to do, and then you've got this huge list of options, and students then only have one or two choices out of so many that just statistically you're not going to have that many people do it. But I think, it isn't just about being in an IT career. I think what's more important probably is actually training people from the use of computers to understand what computers can do, how computers can transform business, how they can actually deliver what you might be passionate about, whatever your focus is. So that's my thoughts on that one. And another one from Laura. I've been part of a conference session discussion that had feedback that had a session on women was too niche, and instead they went for male. I don't quite understand that, sorry. The session on women was too niche. Oh, instead they went for a male-dominated sub-discipline. Is that a comment? Sorry, is Laura here? Could you? It's just a comment, right, okay. Yeah, I mean, I go back to the challenge that when we talk about women, I think a lot of the comments I've made are more about diversity than just women. Women is part of that. And really making sure that we get inclusion. But again, I look around at the audience, and the vast majority of you here are women. And so, yes, do you want to wait for a microphone? Yeah.
I saw a report that said in the first year of the pandemic, they think approximately 54 million women left the workforce, 90% of them completely. Do you think that HEIs should look at potentially targeting these career leavers to retrain in STEM subjects, especially in computer sciences?
I mean, absolutely. I think it's something that many HEIs have tried to do. Certainly in my own discipline of computer science, there's been a long history of conversion masters, so taking women from other disciplines or anybody from other disciplines and converting them into computing. And those are around. The difficulty is convincing people to come into that and come back into the workforce. And I suppose there isn't an easy option as to how you actually contact those people. But I think in terms of moving forward with the fourth industrial revolution, we've talked a lot about lifelong learning for many years. But I think it hasn't really happened in the way that it probably is going to happen now, that people are going to be under pressure through automation to do a lot more continuous learning than they ever did. So people, I think, will have to consider different careers that perhaps they didn't necessarily had to in the past. I think also there's a challenge for higher education, because when you're out in the workforce and people look for upskilling, it's not that often they turn to universities. I remember reading a report probably 20 years ago that said universities had something like 0.5% of the CPD market. And I suppose people tend to think of universities as, well, it's a master's qualification or a PhD. And everybody is talking a lot more about how can I do micro-credentials, how can I do more short upskilling courses and stuff. And so I think universities need to take that on board and say, well, how can we get that out into the marketplace? How can we try and offer more tasters to get people in, more tailored to what people want? So I think the challenge is there for us, but absolutely we need to get that presence out and try and get people back in, not just women, but all parts of the population. Yeah.